Hello, and thanks for checking out Level. Today we're going to discuss monitoring and alerting and how Level can ensure that our IT infrastructure is healthy. First, let's examine a single device to see what sorts of things we might want to be monitoring. Let me go into this device here called Server, and we can see here that I can see its CPU for a while was stuck around 50%, and then recently it dropped here. I can see its memory is about halfway utilization. I can see its disk. So we can see that we're collecting certain statistics coming from the device. There's a few other things that we can also examine. For example, if I come over here to services, I will get a list of all of the services that are on the device, whether they're started or stopped. I can see that we have Active Directory domain services. So this is a domain controller. And if it's a domain controller, then that means the DNS server service is going to be running. And I see that's here. So we have services. The other thing that we can pull is also from processes. We can see what processes are currently running, what amount of CPU they're taking up or memory. And again, we can see here we're capturing total CPU and memory. So these are the things that we're watching on a single device. Let's now look at policies and talk about how we can start to monitor. So under policies and monitor, here we have our list, and I've already created a few policies that we can talk about briefly. For example, here I have one for stolen and lost devices. So every so often we'll have a client that will contact us and say, "Hey, we have misplaced a device," or "Hey, it was stolen out of a vehicle," or something like that. Is there any way you can track it down? And so what we've done is we stick a monitor on that device that will send us an email alert immediately if it comes online, and then we can take further action, and we can even schedule scripts and things like that if we wanted to. We have a general workstation monitoring, and we also have a server monitoring. So we like to break out our resource monitoring into separate pools here because we may not be so concerned if a workstation hard drive gets to a certain percent, but it would be more concerning on a server, for example. And then you'll see we have some roles here. I have domain controllers, Exchange services, file servers, and Nginx. But let's go ahead and examine the domain controllers policy. And so here on the domain controllers policy, we have a couple things. We can see some statistics about when it was created and edited. Next, we have recipients. This is a list of email addresses that can be used if email notifications are enabled on one of the monitors. We'll get to that in a second. Next, we have targets. Targets determine the devices that we're going to be applying this monitor policy to, and they are applied via tags. So you can see that we have a number of tags in here. For example, there was that stolen and lost devices policy earlier. We also have a tag named stolen and lost devices. And so what this means is that I could just go to a device and tag it with that, and then it would inherit the policy attached to the tag. We typically like to name our tags and our policies the same, just so that it's easy to understand what's going on. But there's a lot of different ways this can be organized. And so, for example, I wanted to target those devices that have Exchange services tag as well, then we'll see that shows up here. I'm going to go ahead and remove that though. So for now, we just see that we have a target named domain controllers, and there's a single device. And if I click on this, this will actually stick in the filter for domain controllers and show me that it is in fact the server that I was looking at earlier. Over here on the right, we have our monitors. Let me just click add monitor and we'll talk about these. So we can name the monitor, and then most importantly here, we pick the type of monitor. We can monitor CPU, disk, and memory, just like we showed on the single device. We can monitor its connection. So this would be if level is not receiving a check-in from the device for a certain period of time, then we would consider it down. And so, for example, if a device did not check in for 5 minutes, then that might indicate that there's a problem on the device. Either there's an internet issue or a network problem, or maybe the device is being rebooted, whatever it may be, but that might indicate a problem. We also have here processes, so we can monitor if a process is running or not running, and then we also have services to determine a service state. And so let's look, for example, since this is a domain controller, it looks like I'm monitoring a few services here. And these are services that are important to domain controllers. So we have DFSR, a DNS server, NetLogon service, and the NTDS service. So let me open up one of these and we can just get an idea of what this looks like. So we've chosen service. We have a severity here, and the severity is simply to indicate the degree of importance of the alert when it's created. We have here specific operating systems that we can choose, and these will change depending on the type that we select. Here we enter the service name, and this is not the display name, by the way, this is the actual service name, and we're going to trigger if it's stopped. And then we have a duration. We're going to say if it's stopped for 10 minutes, then we are going to trigger the alert, means the threshold has been breached. Next, we have a checkbox here that says auto resolve alert if no longer applicable. What this means, typically we leave this on. If it's off, then what it's going to mean is that a technician will need to manually resolve the alert, that even if the service is started again, then the alert would remain. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and that way if the service starts up, then we'll just wipe out the alert. We'll close it and we don't need to see it again. We can automatically start the service if it's stopped. And so sometimes this is useful if you have a problematic service. An instance where this would not be desirable is, for example, during Exchange cumulative update installs. Whenever the cumulative update is being installed, which patches the Exchange server, that updater pauses or stops all of the Microsoft Exchange services. And so if we had a monitor on that Exchange server watching the Exchange services, and we started the cumulative update, Level would try to start those services, and that could be problematic for the updater. There are times where it's advisable to turn this off, but you may find that you may want to keep that on. We have an option here to run a script. And so let's say that something stops or we exceed a threshold in some other thing, then we can run a script. For example, if we are using a disk usage, and we could choose a script to do a disk cleanup. And then that way it might be able to do some auto remediation. Last, we have here to send whether or not to send notifications. And so this would send an email to the recipient that we have designated on the policy. And then last, send notification if the alert has been resolved. So this would be an open email saying, hey, there's a problem, and a closed email that said, hey, it's been resolved. Okay. What we're going to do is let's go ahead and try one of these out now. So we have the DNS service, and I'm going to go ahead and change the threshold on this. I don't want to wait for 10 minutes. So I'm just going to lower that all the way as low as it can go. And now I'm going to go back over to the server, and I'm going to stop the DNS service. And there it is, and let's stop it. And you'll see here at the top that we have alerts, and we already have one alert, and that's been there for this whole time. But we should see another alert increment here once it detects that the DNS service is stopped. Okay, good. So now we see that we have two alerts here, and if we click into here and look at the active alerts, we will see that we have DNS service has stopped, and it is on the agent server. Let's go ahead and we will start that service back up, and then we should see that alert go away. All right, the service is running again, and we will see this alert will drop out momentarily. Good. So the alert has been resolved automatically. So the last thing that I'd like to cover is a best practice that we found when it comes to policies and tags. And we already talked a little bit earlier about naming the tags the same thing as the monitor policy if possible. But the other thing too is to break out roles. And so we can see we have a domain controller, we have a file server role, we have an Exchange server role. When we do this, it makes it really modular to apply tags to devices, and then they automatically receive the monitoring that is associated with that tag. And so if I come back here to devices and I look at server, one thing that you may have noticed here is at the top, we have the tag of server, and that was attached to the hard drive and the memory and the CPU monitoring that we can look at in a moment. We have the domain controllers, and that's the monitor policy that we just looked at. But this is also a file server, and so we're also watching some services related to file sharing. This tag was just from a previous video and demoing, so we don't have that applied to anything. But if we look at this server tag, let's go to the policy and we'll see server monitoring. And here we can see that we broke these out. So this contains all the resource monitoring for CPU and hard drive and memory. And then we have these roles here. And so it really helps to keep things nice and clean and organized. That's it for today. We hope this has been useful for you, and we'd invite you to check out our other videos in the library. Thank you.